worked well. It didn't in the end.
So my name is Josh Lapp. I'm with Designing Local, which is an urban planning firm that myself and my business partner Amanda started about 10 years ago, and we are based in Columbus, Ohio. And our whole goal with our work is really to create fun, engaging places all over the country. We do that by doing historic preservation, placemaking, public art, cultural planning, and urban design. So we have a real mix of services, but what we really love to do is focus on pulling out the unique attributes of communities. And as you can see on this map, we work all over the country. So I'm actually based in Columbus, Ohio. You know, what we really love to do is go to different communities and pull out the unique stories and figure out how to put those out into the built environment. So these things can be small scale little projects like what's up on the screen right now. It's a little utility box as part of a series of utility boxes we did for a streetscape project. But, you know, when we're looking at Brockton, you know, we want to look at different opportunities. So what could happen in Brockton? And we want to look at all the way from the small scale to the large scale. We want to figure out how we can take the existing beautiful, awesome attributes that the community has and figure out how to put those into the built environment. So the first time I came to Brockton, and today when I came to Brockton, the first thing I did was step off the train at the train station and thought, oh, this would be a great place for public art. Because we want to welcome people into the community. So how do we create different opportunities? There's also some really amazing artwork in the City Hall, all the way from, we have some even newer paintings of various mayors of the community, and we have a lot of history in the community. But we also have a lot of new people and new things in the community. So we want to figure out how do we bring some of that new life and ensure that the culture of the community is bringing new people in, embracing the population that's here today, and also like not being in stasis. So this artwork that you're seeing right here, these are really wonderful paintings, post-Civil War era that are incredible scale. They're in City Hall on the first floor. But one of our goals is to look at things like that were done, 150 years ago, and figure out how we can bring that into the new era and involve new people. So one of the projects that we're doing that we just launched yesterday and today that you're going to start seeing pop up around the community is called Legends of Brockton. The way that we conceptualized this was that we would figure out how to tell some stories in our planning process, not even like at the end of the day, but right now, how can we tell some stories, get people involved? And so we decided we want to tell, the legends of Brockton, and that could be the stories that happened in the past, and that could be stories of people that are maybe newer to the community. So how can we tell folklore of various groups of people that live in the community, along with things like talking about the Shoe City and maybe mythological creatures that are from different stories of the people that are in the community. So what you're going to be seeing, and I have some not so great pictures of them coming up shortly, are things that connect to the city's historic identity, but also things that we hope connect to the people that are here today. And pulling from different stories of different groups. We selected an artist that he's from about 30 minutes away from Brockton, but he's done some really amazing work, and he's a K through 12 educator. He's got an indigenous background, so has been really in tune with figuring out how we can tell these stories. Once again, I said these are blurry pictures, which gives you even more reason to go out and actually see these. These are various shoes, a little play on the shoe identity, but they're not your old combat boots that are from the Civil War. They're kind of new hip shoes, too hip for me to wear. And they all are decorated with various stories, like this is kind of a Puerto Rican inspired shoe. And they're all within walking distance of here, so we're encouraging folks to get out. They're all within, so we're encouraging folks to get out, and we have kind of little things connected to each one of these. So, see, I can hear you already. I can hear you. Yeah, you're catching it. We really encourage everyone to get out and check these out in the next couple months. They should be up until the end of January. You'll be able to find more information out about them on our website at brocktonartsplan.com. Ultimately, we really need your help to move forward with public art in Brockton. So I just mentioned the website address, which is also going to pop up on the screen here soon. And we really need you all to go there, take our survey, share our survey, but also just engage with the process. I mean, you're already doing that because you're here tonight listening and learning. We're really excited about where this is going, and we really hope you enjoy tonight as a little opportunity to learn more about public art. So first up, Ryan Edwards.
My name's Ryan. I am a part of Masari Studios. I live in Boston, and this is our studio. We're a team of people. One of the things that I'm excited to share with you today as an artist is how a group of people make art together, and how that group of people can make art that we commonly call new media art, right? Things that are in, and I'll talk about what that is. That's a picture of me out here in the water in New Bedford, actually recording for the DATMA project that we did. Apparently recording the sound of water. Anyway, the kind of work that we do is new media work. So that often means things that are technologically driven, that are unstable, you could say. You know, stable media would be like a bronze statue, a concrete bench, or something like that. And what we make is often things that are either performance, that could be short term, or that could be longer term, but that aren't necessarily perfectly fixed. Right? Like a painting or something like that. And part of what I'm excited to share with you today is about how a team of people makes things that is not necessarily fixed. And if that is meaningful to open your minds about what public art can be as you start to envision public art in this area, I hope that's meaningful. Pieces like this, that's a celebration of the solstice. This is something that will actually come again this solstice in a cemetery, the Mount Auburn Cemetery in the Boston area. Tickets are on sale now. It's a 10-night experience leading up to the solstice that is a meditation on winter light. And at the darkest time of the year, ways to come together and explore what it means to be quiet, to meditate, to think about the year, and to cleanse yourself into the new year. It's an example of the kind of work that we do. This is another piece that is an interactive sound sculpture. It's a musical instrument that is played by moving location-aware cubes around. It's another example of a piece that we can tour and share, but that is not fixed, that can actually change. It's cool. It's cool. So this is another piece that we did in Boston at Boston's Fenway Park. This was kind of like an iconic beginning piece for us, where we turned the outfield wall of the Green Monster into a musical instrument and actually scored a whole hour of music and projected on it and created something called Waking the Monster that actually brought the Green Monster to life through a performance energy. Now there we go. That's a New Bedford piece right there, right? We created a piece that Lindsay and the folks at DATMA commissioned our studio, Masari, to create. It was called Vessels, that brought in what we called like a media poem in honor of the fishing vessels of New Bedford. And it was something that played nightly over 6 weeks in the city. And it was an homage and an exploration of the fishing vessels of New Bedford as characters in the civic narrative. This is a piece called Rumble. This is one of the pieces I'd like to talk about. This is a piece in Cincinnati. Apparently we are rocking a Midwest, Ohio connection. And this is an example of a new media piece that was up for about a week. So that's also something I'm kind of entering into the public art discussion, is that public art projects are not necessarily like 10 years forever. A public art project can be 10 days. It can be a day. It can be performative. It can be short term. That's important and cool too. This piece was over a bridge that is about 1,000 feet long, and it had over 1,000 lighting instruments, and we created a sound score that was played back at a light festival that was synchronized with this lighting display. For the city, I think one of the things that comes into play is to see something that's iconic like this bridge, and to see it in a different way. And it was also something that, because it was a part of this festival, the bridge was closed, so people could walk across the bridge. And over 1 million people experienced this, viewing it from the banks of the river and also crossing the bridge in a format that hopefully evolved their sense of how they view that bridge in their city's story. It was a really fun project for us too. I got to go there and record the sound of the bridge, record the sound of the city, and then create a sound score that was of and by the city of Cincinnati that was told through this story. This is another piece that I'd like to share with you that's called Memory Diffusion. This piece called Memory Diffusion is an example of a new media piece that is interactive, but the point that I'd like to share with you is that it isn't interactive just in a moment. For an interactive piece, I think to have value over a period of time, there's value in something evolving and growing. If you erect an artwork that's interactive and you immediately figure it out within a couple of minutes, you don't have a reason to revisit it or think about it again. It will recede into the landscape. But a piece like this is something that actually develops a memory. This piece has 3 cameras and it watches things that happen in the space and it records those things, and when it's reminded of something by seeing something similar again, it will play back its memory. So if I walk through that area with the cello case, and 2 weeks later someone else walks through with the cello case, it might remember that cello case shape and recall that in this environment. It's in a high school, in a performing arts high school. So the question to us was, how do we actually create a piece that has meaning over a year, over 4 years, or over a career of someone who works there, but that also has interactivity, in this case like a latent interactivity, rather than being kind of crack the code immediately. It's called Memory Diffusion, and my name's Ryan. Thank you very much.
All right, up next we have Margarita.
Hi everybody, I'm Margarita, and I'll mostly be concentrating about art that was inspired by my travels, but I thought I'd start with some of my personal kind of autobiographical works for context. So I grew up running around a village with my German Shepherd, surrounded by family and nature has continued to play a really big part in my life and in my work, especially the human connection with kind of the more infinite, intricate, mystical aspects of nature. As you can see in some of these pieces. And I've always felt that my work would lend itself well to the mural format because I love to paint large, I love to use really bold colors and brush strokes, and I believe this is my first mural created for the Salem Arts Festival, their mural slam, a couple years ago. I'm also really big into traveling. I moved to the US when I was 6 from Moscow, Russia. And when I was 13, I started going back, kind of flying back by myself to visit family. I also studied abroad in Hong Kong, and there I was introduced to the idea of backpacking. And in 2019, I fulfilled kind of a lifetime dream of backpacking throughout Asia. This is my old route that I took. It's all via land transport, so I didn't fly at all. I hate flying. So this was all trains and buses, a little bit of hitchhiking, whatever. I was on a very tight budget, so at the most expensive countries, I was spending $20 a day, staying in a lot of hostels, and naturally I started to paint murals in these hostels. So this was actually my first hostel mural in Isfahan in Iran. And you can see the hostel owner up top, and below the guy with the pineapple is a local shop owner that I grew to kind of love and buy a lot of my fruits from. And Sahan, the hostel owner, introduced me to some cafe owners downtown, and I painted their electrical box, so the coffee giraffe, kind of enjoying a cup of coffee. And Sahan also wanted the entire outside wall of his mural to be decorated with these crazy alien designs. And so I started working on that. And on the left, you see the original design. But it turned out that Sahan did not get the right permissions. And so the local authorities were extremely unhappy with my design. They called it a devil in a hijab. So, yeah, it was pretty crazy. So I had to paint over all of her legs, and we didn't have enough time to get all the permissions. Before I got my visa, before my visa expired, so had to kind of let go of that project. This is a mural in Tashkent, Uzbekistan, where they have really cool kind of clothing traditions with really bright colors and patterns, so I had a lot of fun painting those. This one's in Kaili, China, which was my favorite city in China by far. They have a lot of these local artistic customs, one of which is the wax batik tradition. You can see up top on the right. And so the mural is kind of dedicated to that. And in the middle you see Angelo, the hostel owner. I got to know these hostel owners really well. And as I was traveling, I was also very inseparable from my camera. And I came back with just thousands of pictures that are still kind of somewhat untouched in my camera roll on Google Photos. And I started painting from these photos. So this one's inspired by, again, Iran, the Rainbow Mountains. This is the Kerman kind of desert area. This one is inspired by Hormuz, which is this really cool island in the south of Iran with the most gorgeous landscape, just completely unearthly, colorful lands. And the next one was actually from the north of Russia. It's from the same trip. The border with Estonia. There's this really cool monastery with these kind of cave burials underneath it, and a lot of the local people have village houses in that area, so I was coming back on a bus from that really beautiful landscape kind of back into reality. So this one's kind of back to our reality, back to Massachusetts. This one's in Salem, Massachusetts at the Punta Urban Art Museum, inspired by a man I photographed in Kyrgyzstan, where they have really cool horseback riding culture with like this wild freedom feel to it. And this one's again Salem Mural Slam, inspired by my own painting. Kind of see it on the left, called Kaleidoscope, a woman mesmerized by the fish and all of the reflections in the water that she's standing in. So some of these are very recent works. So this one's very recent. And this one is a pew that I painted for the Newton Community Pride Festival called Sunsets Make My Spirit Soar. I actually painted it during the festival itself, so I was surrounded by all the festivities and the people, so that was quite the interesting experience, as some of these public projects tend to be. This one's very close to home. It's in my mom's backyard. I painted it I have a little sister with a giant age gap from me, so I wanted the backyard to be kind of a more magical place for her to be. And I love folklore, I love log houses, so I made the shed into a folk log house. And I have an art studio at Western Ave Studios in Lowell, so it was really cool this summer to finally have some pieces that in places where I actually frequent. So this is in front of the Brewed Awakening Coffee House in Lowell, inspired by coffee and kind of the energy that fills us up after we drink some coffee or tea, whatever. So this is the interior of a 1970s salon that has been completely unchanged and untouched for decades since it's been closed. And I was lucky enough to visit this kind of museum of a salon very recently because I was commissioned to paint the outside of the building. And I dedicated that wall to the salon, to its interior, and to that time, that era, and the feeling that I imagined the salon to have had while it was still operational. And this is my last public art project. I just finished it a couple weeks ago, so I'm very proud of it. So thank you. That's a bit about me.
Those were amazing, Margarita.
Thank you. Thank you.
Next we have Levi with New House.
All right, so thank you. I'm Levi, one of the co-founders of New House. At New House, we make inflatable art installations. So most people know about inflatables as either, pool toys or bouncy castles, or maybe the other end of the spectrum is, space like habitat or inflatable raft. We're somewhere in the middle. So I'm gonna be talking a lot about inflatables today. So why inflatables? Well, air is free. When we started, after we graduated, we had a couple jobs lined up, but it was a really scrappy beginning. So keeping costs low was a really big thing. And yeah, so installation is also really easy and manageable. You bring out the fabric, you anchor it down, and you turn on the switch, and in about a couple minutes you have a 40-foot dome, whereas if you're building with metal or wood, it can take days or weeks. So also the interior has a lot of nice qualities. So because air is see-through, you don't see the structure. The walls are sort of curvilinear. Also, if There's inflatable on like the ground level, it's nice and soft. So, you know, there's a lot of advantages in just the space itself. The material also comes with a lot of advantages. So this material we used was ripstop nylon with a metallized coating on it. And it just kind of, you know, it looked like metal. It looked like this thing that was welded together, cost $1 million, but, you know, it's just ripstop nylon. We also play with translucency a lot. So this project, you know, we were looking at how red, blue, and green can combine to create the spectrum. So same thing as like your phone, you have the pixels are red, blue, and green, but it creates all the colors in the spectrum. So the color is sort of comes through that fabric and is projected on the floor. From there, we sort of multiplied that cell, you know, like 100 times, and then that color was then projected on the interior fabric, but you don't walk into the space. So we wanted to like kind of focus more on those subtle colors that the red, blue, and green was creating. We also, you know, the opposite of like translucency, we focus on, or like have used fabric that is light blocking. So, you know, we can really focus on the light that is coming through. In this project, we used fog to kind of pick up that light and created a lot of, the light looked almost physical. And this project too uses light blocking fabric, but we used it to create 100 pinhole cameras or camera obscuras around a dome. So for those who don't know, camera obscura is the most basic camera. It's how a camera works. You have a tiny hole, and that's the only light that you let in, and it retains the image. So all of these images are live projections of the outside. And an interesting thing that happens with this is, since it's inflatable, you can kind of push in the wall and like focus on different things that are different distances away. You can change the focal length. Similar to, you know, translucency, we also play with LEDs and how the fabric can kind of be a diffuser and create a nice glowing object. This piece was actually installed at Blink as well in Cincinnati, and has like animations that like bounce over it. Inflatables also, you know, come with a fan and other things that you can kind of play with. So this piece is interactive where when people sit on it, the pressure, since the pressure changes, the pressure is read by a sensor and the sensor affects the LED, so there's like a nice feedback. We also make everything in-house, so we're really inspired by fabrication techniques. So these are inspired by like Zodiac boats. They're really durable, but like larger than life things that kids can pick up and move around, but it's also durable enough for, you know, a dozen adults to sit on. This is one of the earlier projects we had where we weren't fabricating the airtight elements of it, but we bought these ship fenders that are for like giant cargo ships, and we used them as columns to space out nets so that people could climb up and through, and, you know, people could sit on them, they could drum them. Yeah, we also, you know, inflatables are a quick way to like introduce something to the built environment. So this is a traveling giant poo emoji for the brand Poopery. We occasionally, you know, will work with brands to create something custom. Yeah, this piece also, you know, kind of similar to the built environment. It was installed for a couple months in downtown Providence on a parking garage, and, you know, this is usually a parking garage that sort of just looks bland or whatever, but for a couple months had this, you know, LED display on it and all that stuff. We also use other things to power the inflatable. So these are bike-powered generators that power the fans and the LEDs. So this installation will kind of undulate during the night as people are pedaling and not pedaling. We've also been inspired by bricks. So, you know, how can an inflatable be a brick? How can we build like that? So we'll, you know, came up with different ways to strap it and connect them. And, you know, it has its own unique properties that are a lot different than a brick building. Inflatables are a lot more than pool toys and space stations, but we're kind of working on those as well. Not actual space stations, but you know. And then Yeah, the last slide was just kind of a model, picture of a model. We're always tinkering around and building new things. So yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, I'm gonna get started. I'm gonna begin with a prompt. What is your role in a story that is bigger than you? How might you take your own interests, your own aspirations, your experience, and compose that into a kind of coherent narrative, and then find a place for it in the broader world? What is your story in a story that is bigger than you? And what voices might we add and invite to increase the richness of this shared story? I'm Park McDowell. I'm an architect and a fabricator, and I've been working in a pro bono capacity with the Lynn-based nonprofit Beyond Walls since the group's inception back in the end of 2016. We believe in the agency of the built environment to shape community, and specifically in the power of art to increase the value of the communities where we live. Now, as an architect, I work on projects of all different scales, but on every project, we aspire to embed amenities that serve a broader community, one beyond the bounds of the design brief. So a bridge might become a sculpture which communicates this community is deserving of beautiful things. And part of my role is to conceptually frame a project, to communicate the core priorities of stakeholders, and then provide these kinds of structured opportunities for engagement. The aspiration here is that end users become co-authors, collaborators in the design process. That's what makes a successful project long-term. And at Beyond Walls, we do this. We align our arts initiatives with the strategic goals of our community partners. We engage those local stakeholders as collaborators, both in defining the problem and in developing the solution. So we had a constellation of efforts that came out of this approach in Lynn, for example, where a rail line cuts through downtown, and the city identified these zones as areas of increased crime and vehicle pedestrian accidents. And they said, we need better lighting. And we did more than just that. We did more than just illuminate it. We made it epic. We made it a destination instead of a place to avoid. And downtown needs to be more walkable, local business owners said. So we took vintage neon signs, things that are no longer connected to any current business, and we used them as urban devices to pull pedestrians from one destination to the next through downtown. And over 100 murals, they elevate the stories of the community. And these are building scale pieces that say, we are here, our stories are worth telling. And Beyond Walls does this by coordinating groups of local as well as international architects. And we try to curate the demographics and the cultures of these artists to the communities where the work takes place. And then the pandemic hit, and it changed everything. And the priorities of our communities shifted. And so our work shifted too. WASH came out of a prompt from the local health organization that said at-risk populations, particularly the homeless, no longer have a place to wash their hands. We need a solution. And the business community saw the success of WASH and said, we need something like that for outdoor dining. So we developed Fold, which is this laser-cut stainless steel origami. It's a design that allows for many hands to be meaningfully engaged in the production of this collective contribution to our shared environment. Now, the pandemic encouraged us to reclaim outdoor public space for public use. And right now, I think, right now more than ever before perhaps, there is a public appetite and there is a civic value proposition that affirms this kind of work. I'm keen to capitalize on our current momentum to deliver fast, attainable, meaningful change. And we're doing just that. The Beyond Walls Mural Festival has grown now to include over 180 pieces in 6 years, now in 11 cities. So we've got local and international talent. We do this big, potent work which magnifies and validates identities that are vital to the character of vibrant but often underserved communities. And I lead what we call the Design Response Initiatives with Beyond Walls. And on these projects, as with all my work, fabrication becomes this key device for design agency. And in the Payette shop here, we've got computer-controlled cutting machines and welding equipment and woodworking tools that we use to give material, concrete reality to these ideas. This kind of hands-on fabrication also provides an entry point, particularly for youth, And Ben, as you see here, came out of a summer program, which we did with Boston high school students. The studio is about learning how to read your city, and with that literacy and understanding, cultivate one's own spatial agency. Over in the Roxbury community in Boston, we had this garden that was developed on the site of what was once a Black Panther Community Information Center. And working with the neighborhood and students from Northeastern, we researched the local history, we interviewed residents, and we coordinated with the city and the stakeholders to produce this Black Panther commemoration project, which uses public art to highlight the local history of social justice activism. And there's a spirit here that underpins the project, which was present in that place long before I entered the scene, and it will continue long after my work is done. And it grows and evolves. That's the kind of thing which underpins a lot of this work, like this piece currently in production in Chinatown. We've got an activation that reinforces the cultural identity of that neighborhood. In this piece called Dancing Dragon, it's located on the perimeter of the district, and it's an area that, due to its location, is prone to a kind of cultural erosion. But with a cross-section of Chinatown contributors, we developed this meandering steel pavilion. It's got a canopy structure and provides seating and shade, and armature really for community activity. The piece was inspired by the traditional Chinese dragon dance with an exuberant geometry above and joyful gathering below. And the residents of the two adjacent apartment buildings here really embraced the process. From the community design sessions where every comment was translated into both English and Mandarin. And then we had a paint day, which brought over 40 volunteers down to my shop, which was nearby. The project opens next Saturday, so a week from tomorrow. On these projects, this public work especially, my role is to provide an injection of energy and expertise at just the right moment to catalyze the efforts of our community stakeholders. This is the kind of work where we have to approach it with humility, almost with like an openness, an invitation for many voices to contribute. What is your role in a story that is bigger than you? Thank you.
Okay, so a couple weeks ago I was installing a public art project in Cambridge, Massachusetts, not too far away from here. Installing a public art project for me is like giving birth, in that stronger, more capable people are doing all of the work, and I sit back, watch it all unfold in shock and horror, gasping for breath, passing out occasionally, and shrieking. But when it's all installed and this new piece is out in the world, all dewy and new and shiny, I sit there totally wrecked in awe. In this particular instance, when I was sitting there holding the bottom of a 12-foot deer's leg, a monster truck pulled up to the adjacent intersection. The driver looked over, looked right past me and my glowing pride, looked at the deer, contemplated for a moment, and then said, "What the fuck is that? This city is full of potholes and we're spending taxpayer dollars on giant steel rats. This city's going straight to hell." At that same moment, another person was coming across the crosswalk. She looked over at that man in the monster truck and said, "I know, it's horrible, absolutely horrible." Public art is the most brutal and humiliating forms of creative endeavors. It's times like this that I wonder why I do it at all, and I have to remind myself. So, I studied at the Cleveland Institute of Art. My interests were straddled between industrial design and sculpture, two entirely different disciplines in two entirely different buildings. In industrial design, the focus was on user needs, efficiency, functionality, and you had to dress like a banker. And in sculpture, the emphasis was on the conceptual, materiality, and space, and you had to come to class unwashed. So I really liked aspects of both, and still do, but I could not imagine myself designing a toothbrush, and I could not imagine myself sculpting something, putting it on a pedestal, and letting it suffocate inside of a gallery. So I love my toothbrush. Right? And I love toothbrush designers. Ever since I've had my toothbrush, I've not had a single cavity, and it fits perfectly in the palm of my hand. That is good design. And I also love seeing artwork in a gallery. I enjoy going with my children and observing these works and critiquing them in a space void of context. I genuinely like it. But I could not imagine myself doing either one of those things. And so my professor of psychology at the time suggested I read a book called Bowling Alone by Robert Putnam. In it, Rob talks about the importance of social interaction, the essentialness of social interaction, and that communities with more social interaction, something as simple as eye contact, a good morning hello, a nod of the head on a sidewalk. Communities with more of this are happier, healthier, wealthier, safer, smarter, and more resilient. He talks about the important role that others can play in being catalysts for social interaction. And he talks about art and design being able to, in his words, spark the civic imagination of our fellow citizens to discover and invent new ways of connecting socially that fit our changing lives. Right? For me at this point, this was incredible. Art and design can change the world, right? And very simply, by creating conversation in public space. So, sidebar. Some of you out there are like, well, Mr. Riegelman, how does it actually work? I don't actually believe you. That's only one book. What does he know? I don't have all the answers. I'm an artist. I'm not a scientist or a sociologist. But study after study after study, exploring interaction in public spaces shows that it is absolutely essential. Harvard just released a study a few months ago. I'm sure everyone saw it. It was on the front page of every newspaper in America. That daily social interactions means you will live longer. It's more important than exercise or eating right. You don't have to do those things anymore. You just have to go outside. So get outside and make a new friend or meet up with an old one. Art and design can change the world. So once I had this idea in my head, I tried to figure out, well, what happens when industrial design, sculpture, and public space overlap, right? And this may have been on everyone's radar. It wasn't on my radar. I didn't know what public art was. I had no interest in public space. I never spent any time in public space thinking, what would I do different in this public space? It was not in my world. So my first attempt at this was to look at bus shelters. This is a space that I used on a daily basis, in a place where people were gathering but not interacting. It seemed like an easy win. My idea was, the materials are offsetting. All we need to do is shift materials and people will have conversations. So I took materials from the home, put them in the bus shelters, and what happened? No one used the bus shelters. People stood outside of the bus shelters. And so the project, in most metrics that matter, failed. And so, what did we learn? Understand the site and the people that use them. Okay, but I was young and naive, and that didn't bother me that I failed, so I went at it again. The next project, I was interested in step sitting. So, I'm a Cleveland boy. Step sitting culture was something I'd never heard of until I went to New York City, where I was doing internships, design internships in the summer. And so I was really interested in this idea of step sitting and the history of step sitting. Like, this is the theater seats, right? You have a front row seat to all the craziness that happens in New York City. And I really wanted to create a project that highlighted this unique history and highlighted this interesting kind of social culture. So I created stair squares, which nestled into the rise and runs of steps and acted as a table between two people, or a place to sit with friends, or a table to have a romantic dinner. And so this project was wildly successful. It was my first real public art project. And so from there, I learned, know the history. This is a moment where the history was really interesting and it helped reinforce what I was doing, right? I had an idea or I had an interest. I went into the research that was reinforced by the research, so it gave the project a little more oomph. So from there, I knew public art, this is awesome. It's like, it satisfies my interest creatively. I'm doing good in the world. And there was a level of collaboration that I really liked. So. And I also liked how many facets there were to the work, right? I needed to be a fabricator one day, and then a PR person the next, and then a structural engineer the next, and there's just a lot of interesting layers to it. So I create site-specific public experience. That means I come to a site without any preconceived notion of what should exist, and through site research, community engagement, I create works that I feel are tethered to the site conceptually and formally. So I'm going to show you a few installations of what that looks like. The Great Picnic. This is a project in Cleveland, Ohio, outside the Contemporary Art Museum there. The idea was to design a picnic table for 100. So in this instance, I looked towards my family. When my family has a picnic, we have an annual picnic, it's a shit show every year. There's fighting, there's screaming, everyone's angry, there's crying, and then we all eat lunch. And so I wanted a table that kind of talked about that intersection of ideas and ideology. And so the table is based on a classic picnic table, but it has it kind of has these intersecting tops, and each top is a different material. I have a different stain. So it's about this idea that you come with your own baggage, but we can still sit and have a meal together. Bluebirds, this is more of an integrated project. This is a project where a small community on the west side of Cleveland, they came to me, they said, we have a little bit of money, we want to do something cool that makes our community special. Amazing. And so I worked with them to create Bluebirds. The idea here is that this waterfront community happens to be an important part of bird migration. And so I like the idea of sculpting the birds out of water. If you've been to Lake Erie, the water isn't blue. But you know, sculpting the birds out of water and then having these gems throughout the neighborhood. And it allowed people to walk around and see the different architecture and just explore the neighborhood in a way that wasn't done before. And this project, this is one of the oldest projects it's one of the original projects, and still to this day they have tours in Cleveland that can go see this neighborhood and see these bluebirds. It really has captured the hearts of people visiting Cleveland. The Meeting House, this is a project that was done on the Greenway. If you're familiar with the Greenway, it's this kind of the devastating repercussions of the Big Dig, and so the result is this kind of incredible green scar that runs through downtown Boston. And I was interested in local architecture, obviously the duality of space, pedestrians on top and vehicles on the bottom. The idea is that as you're driving your car, you see the bottom of the house. And I was also interested in the destruction of architecture, displacement of people, and things like that. And so the project was very interesting, very complicated to build. We used traditional building techniques, but we're also building it at an angle. So you could only fabricate for about 15 minutes at a time before you started getting a little bit nauseous, but it really was a kind of a wonderful, cool, iconic project. The reading desk was at the Cleveland Public Library, and so they have Eastman Reading Garden, and on the facade of the library they have two griffins that guard the entrance of the library. Griffins are very cool, mythical creatures. They build their nests of gold and guard them ferociously. So you'll see these on lots of government buildings throughout the country. So the idea here was going around the neighborhood, going around Cleveland, gathering up pieces of wood in true bird fashion, and creating this large nest in the Eastman Reading Garden. It was meant to talk about libraries as a place for nurturing and a place for growth. And it also allowed for a lot of programming. So they had yoga in the morning, children readings in the afternoon, and it really became a nice place, temporary installation for people to gather. And the last project I'm going to show here is Threshold. This is a DATMA project. It was installed in New Bedford a few months ago. It was a really interesting piece. So DATMA, they had this theme of shelter, right? So this is the first project where I've ever had kind of a direction. They had an overarching theme of shelter. And so they wanted me to come in, explore the site, and design a project based on this theme. And so as I was doing my research, I was very interested in the kind of the history. Do you know about the New Bedford history? It's totally weird and insane. Worth a read. Whaley Museum, crazy. And so, but throughout the history, there are these moments where this idea of being welcoming was really highlighted. So a place for people being persecuted for their religious beliefs could go, doors open. A place for immigrants to go to find work, open. A significant part of the abolitionist movement for people running away from slavery in the South, doors were open. And so this was a recurring theme, and I really liked the experience of that partially open door. So this is an 18-foot doorway. It's two-sided. The blue side, which faces the rising sun and the water, that is meant to talk about or represent that watery history. And on the other side, this beautiful mosaic is to talk about that colorful future. So it's very important that you walk up to the work, take a moment, and then cross that threshold, because it is a significant moment in order to kind of cross that threshold into the unknown. So from all of these projects, the thing that I began to understand was the importance of collaboration. It takes so many people to finish any one of these projects. working with other artists, poets, writers, structural engineers, fabricators, lots of different fabricators, landscape architects, the list goes on and on for the people required to make these projects work. So in terms of my process, I start every project the same. Research. Libraries are my best friends. Librarians are awesome. Local historians are incredible. It's like you can get so much unique information by talking to these people. And so I gather a ton of that before I start sketching at all. The next step for me is observation. How do people use the site? And this is, again, sitting for a couple of days. How do people use the site? What type of people are using the site? Where is the sun coming from? What does the architecture look like? Trying to understand the space. Is there a specific bird that you hear all day long, or is it change from evening to nighttime? So really understanding the site. And then documenting the aspects that seem to float to the top that are most important. All this is relevant for site-specific work because these types of details will help direct the work. It'll direct the type of fabrication. It'll direct the type of material choices, the duration, the colors used, etc. And then once I have that information, I feel like I have a good understanding of the site, then I do engagement. And that's when I'm doing coffee shop meetups or meeting at bars or restaurants, wherever people are gathering, libraries, and having conversations to understand what people want to see in art or understand what their stories are. I've heard lots of interesting things like, oh, well, in that river, my father was baptized. It's like, what? That's incredible. And so you get this stuff that you couldn't get from a library, you can only get from face-to-face interaction. And so there's a lot of this, and it's really, really helpful. And at this point, I can also share some ideas. I'm like, well, what do you think about this? And they're like, no. So there's a really rich dialogue back and forth. So the project I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about is a project that in my portfolio is the one that is at the height of social interaction. And so Domino Park Playground is one that I designed. It's in Domino Park in Brooklyn. If you've never been there, it's an incredible space. And so the first step for me is understanding the site. So it is an old industrial manufacturing facility. It took up 7 city blocks, so it's huge on the waterfront in Brooklyn. And so it was also producing in its heyday, it's about 200 years old, it was producing 70% of America's sugar, so a lot of sugar is being produced here. And the client asked me to design a playground. I've not designed a playground before, but they wanted it to be artist driven. So I did research on the site to get a good understanding of its origins. Before they started dismantling the site, I was allowed to take tours of it so I could understand the textures and materials, and I left that being like, let kids play here, it is awesome. Because it really was it was a playground for kids. Lead, that's the problem, lead paint. So, because I even wanted to have portions of the factory be used in the playground, and we just weren't able to. So other parts of outreach, which was fun, was just reaching out on social media. Hey, people with kids. I didn't have kids at this point. What do you like about playgrounds? And parents are like, benches, places to plug in our phones. But they're also like slides, monkey bars. We got a lot of good feedback. And then I could calculate. Okay, we have 13 votes for slides. Then the other thing I did is borrow other people's children. In New York City, you can't go to playgrounds unless you have a kid. I did not have kids, so I had to borrow other people's kids, which is really cool because you can get a lot of interesting information. First thing you should know about borrowing someone else's kid, they require water and food throughout the day. I did not know this with the first kid, and it did not end well. He survived, but it was not pretty. Then for me, once I have this information, I do a lot of sketching. I wanted to keep the aesthetic industrial, so all of my early sketches were very, very industrial, and I was trying to pull things directly from the original factory. And then the sketches get more developed. I have a very small footprint, so I went up in elevation to really maximize play space. Then that slowly continues to get more developed. Also, I wanted to make sure, I wanted this to be kind of a creepy playground. I didn't want kids to look at this. I showed this rendering to a friend. He's an industrial designer. He's like, it looks like a prison. Don't do it. I'm like, yes, that's exactly right. I wanted kids to look at this and be like, Mom, I don't know if I want to play here. Because I wanted them to be very unsure. So there's fake broken windows, and this a lot of hard edges. And it turned into Domino Park Playground, also known as Sweetwater. And so the idea is children enter as sugarcane they get chopped up. The first slide for bad kids, they get discarded as contaminants. And then you go to, the good kids get to Sweetwater Silo, which is the big one in the middle. And that's where the filtering process is. So they get filtered up and down and up and down and up and down. And the bad kids there get shot out the slide, which is an incredible slide. And then they slowly go through the process until they end as sugarcane, molasses, or contaminants. And so the entire space was designed to mimic that refining process and also capture that industrial aesthetic, but I designed it in a way that parents could fit through also. This is the only park, or at the time it was the only playground in New York that you could go to without your parents. That was something I said from the get-go. I want people to be able to just go down the slide if they want to, so adults can. And so all the spaces are large enough for an adult to get through, but also of code for kids 2 to 5 and 5 to 12. And so one point that I think is most exciting about this, aside from the cross-section of people that use this park, which is incredible, is that the highest accessible point in the park is in Sweetwater Silo. So the kids have the best views of Manhattan, of Brooklyn. It's really, really cool. Check it out if you ever go, and make sure you go to the top of the silo. Accessibility, very important to me. It's important for a couple of reasons. I grew up in a very non-art family, and now all my friends are art people. So I spend my time between two groups of people, and public art was a way for me to communicate with everyone all together, which is really nice. So my mom knows nothing about art, and she says things like, "Oh honey, as long as you're happy." I'm like, "Okay, thanks mom." But public art, she can understand to a certain level. So I can have a really rich conversation with my non-art mother and also have a really rich conversation with former professors. And I think that level of accessibility for me is really, really exciting because it just maximizes the types of conversations and the amount of conversations I can have. So, my non-art friend, Zach, said, "Mark, I'm gonna be in Columbus. I would love to see your piece. Send me a pin." Pin sent. A couple minutes later, he goes, "Good stuff, was very fun and very sturdy." I wasn't sure what he meant because the piece is not very fun, but it is very sturdy. There are fun elements, so if you get close and you see the lattice work, it's comprised of thousands of objects made in Columbus. There's teeth, there's artificial limbs, there's some DeLoreans, there's weird stuff in there. So there are funny things, but the work is not fun. Anyways, then I saw these 3 undulating text dots and I started getting concerned. And then about 2 minutes later, I got about a dozen pictures of him and other people standing on top of this 22-foot sculpture. I blurred out the image because I think there may be some legal issues and now I have plausible deniability. So I said, "Zach, who are all those people?" And he said, "I asked them for help getting up, then they joined." Was it easy to get on top? 1 chair, 3 people, easy. But what are you doing? This is the city's nightmare. Dude, public art. Everyone interacts with it differently. Yes, that's exactly right. Public art. Everyone interacts with it differently. So, public space is important. Public art is important. We need to spend more time focusing on public space because we know the impact that good public spaces can have on communities. And I'm very excited about the work that all of these artists are doing in trying to improve our built environment. Because with really good built environments, we can really transform communities. So that's it. Thank you very much.